Hi everybody, it's Maria at Read, Create, Repeat Homeschool. I have a bit of a cold today, so I'm sorry if I sound weird. Hopefully you'll understand me, but that's life. I'm doing my August wrap-up video today, and I read 15 books, which is pretty good, I think, considering the month of August is crazy busy. But I'm going to go ahead and do it in the order that I read them. So, first up was Eleanor Roosevelt's You Learn by Living. I've been wanting to read this book for a very long time. Eleanor Roosevelt is a really amazing historical figure, and in the book she just talks about things that she learned throughout her life about making better choices, surrounding herself with inspiration, and it's really a great book to pick up. It wasn't too long, and the chapters don't have to be read back to back because it's just, you know, different lessons in each chapter. So I'd really recommend picking it up. I did give it 5 stars. The second book I read was called Rich and Pretty by Rumaan Alam, and I only gave this one 2 stars, although I think it was probably just because the time in my life I read it. It's about 2 friends that have grown up together and have kind of made different life choices. One has done more the career path, and the other one has done more the love path. And they kind of are looking at each other's lives and each other's choices and figuring out how to relate to each other now that they're grown. I think this book would have been amazing for me to read about 10 years ago, perhaps. And even though it's written by a male, he really does a great job at describing how females think. So, at least the females that I know. So, it's a great chick lit read if you want to pick it up, or even just, you know, you want a lighter read, or especially if you're a person who is struggling with making that transition away from college life into grown-up life. I would pick it up. So I only gave it 2 stars. Maybe it's a 3-star. I don't know. So it had a lot of hype. That's why I probably gave it 2 stars. The third one I read is Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter, and I got this for free in a Goodreads giveaway. I don't have it to show you because I already donated it to the free library that I donate to. So it's really got a beautiful cover though. It's yellow and gray. And this book I gave 4 stars. And the only reason I gave it 4 stars is probably because I read A Monster Calls this year as well. They both deal with grief very well. In Grief with this is the Thing with Feathers, the grief is represented by a bird, and you can kind of see how the dad or slash husband who loses his wife and their sons deal with the loss of the woman in their life. And it's a really beautiful book. It's not my normal kind of read because it's not written in regular writing. It's kind of poetic. There's shorter chapters. I could read it in the afternoon. But if you're dealing with grief, or you know someone dealing with grief and they like kind of quirkier writing, this would be a good one to pick up. The next one I read was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, just like everyone else. I gave this one 2 stars. I know there's a lot of hype around it, and I'm sure that didn't help. It is written as a play, and I think I just missed the descriptive writing of the other Harry Potters. If you think of it as a Rowling book, it's only 2 stars. If you think of it as a fan fiction book, it gets a lot higher. I liked seeing Harry Potter as a father figure. That was neat. I liked some of the new characters. I was frustrated by how flat some of my favorite characters felt. And maybe seeing the play would be different, but for me, it just was kind of, I told my husband he can take it or leave it. It wasn't like a must read, and it's definitely not Harry Potter canon in my book. So, the 5th thing I read was The Yoga of Max's Discontent by Karan, Bajaj, not sure. And I mentioned this one in my mid-year freakout tag as the biggest disappointment. It just had a lot of hype around it. It has a beautiful cover, and I was really excited about reading a man's journey to India and trying to find himself. But for me, I felt like he could have developed more than he did in his travels. And for that, I gave it 2 stars. So, the number 6 read was The Pearl by John Steinbeck, and I gave this one 4 stars. It's one of John Steinbeck's short novels, and it's based on a Mexican folktale, in which case the main character finds the biggest pearl anybody's ever found, and it leads to paranoia and greed, and he doesn't really know what to do, and the whole time his sweetheart is telling him, we have to dump this thing, it's ruining our lives, and he doesn't want to get rid of it. I read this very quickly. It made me cry at the end. It was a beautiful book. John Steinbeck has the most descriptive, and haunting writing when he's describing hard circumstances. And I'm loving my John Steinbeck binge this year, so I definitely would pick that one up. Numbers 7 through 9 was the Divergent Trilogy. I am not a person who likes to read things when they're popular. I like to get to them before they're popular or long after. And so it'd been a while and I wanted to watch the movies, but I have my books first and movie rule. So I picked up the Divergent Trilogy for my friend, and actually I still have the 2 that I have left. Insurgent Allegiant I have left from her that I have to give back. But I loved Hunger Games, and I preferred Hunger Games, so maybe it's not fair to compare the 2. And again, I might have liked this at a different time in my life. It was neat seeing how the different intelligences kind of had their own groups. So if you're not familiar with the Divergent series, basically there's people who join a group in their teenage years and then stick with them, so they will leave their family to come join these other groups. So there's the intelligent group, the honest group, the kind of warrior fighting group, and the helper group. And you kind of figure out, I don't want to spoil too much if you haven't read it, but basically you figure out how these groups have failed, how they've succeeded, and basically kind of teaches you the lesson that you need to have a balance in a world for it to work. And yeah, so it has some interesting questions. I think for me, what was kind of weird about it was in the first book, you find out that she kind of has a thing with her instructor. She's flirting with him a little bit, or he's flirting with her. And I didn't find out until later on in the book that he was only 2 years older than her. So in my mind, I just pictured this like skeezy guy flirting with this young trainee person, which wasn't necessarily the case. But by the time I'd figured out that that wasn't the case, it was still kind of like, don't mess around with your instructors. It's just general good life lesson, people. Don't do that. It's just kind of weird. So that's why I gave it, I think, 3 stars. Yeah, so I liked it. It wasn't a love for me. Number 10 was Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, and this one was 4 stars. If you're not familiar with Neil Gaiman, he writes some weird stuff. He wrote Coraline and the Graveyard Book and some other really neat books, but you have to kind of be in a quirky mood for it. I read this one in an evening because it's only, it's this little guy right here, The Ocean at the End of the Lane. So it's not too long. Beautiful cover art. Basically, it is the story of a man. He's coming back to a neighborhood that he lived in when he was a kid, and he visits this family that he had left, and you kind of slowly find out about how there was a girl that lived there that plays into his life, and him figuring out how his family worked, and kind of coming of age story, but with a twist. Again, I don't want to do spoilers, but Gaiman has really intense writing. As far as you feel creeped out when the characters are creeped out, you feel freaked out when they're freaked out, and yeah, it was a really interesting book. His books for me are hit or miss. For this one, I actually gave it 4 stars, so it was a hit for me, I guess. But yeah, if you're wanting to take a dip with Neil Gaiman, it's not too long, so it's a good one to try out. I would do that. Number 11 was The Historian, which was another one of my disappointments for the year. Elizabeth Kostova. Basically, it's the story of Dracula, but it's kind of like the Da Vinci Code, and they weave it together. I was a little frustrated with the character development in it. I felt like they all were kind of written the same. So that was a bummer for me. I really loved Dracula, and so I had high hopes going in, especially since my mom really liked it. So sorry, Mom. I guess I have a different opinion on that one thing. So the next one is Julia Child's Rules by Karbo. I showed this one in my what I'm reading this week video, and basically Julia Child's Rules, it turned out okay. I gave it 2 stars. It's written in different chapters. Again, my favorite chapter was called Why Every Woman Needs a Blowtorch. I thought that was kind of clever. It was a good book. I would have appreciated it more if the author hadn't inserted so much of their own story in, just because I wasn't expecting it, and I love Julia Child. So again, if you are looking for a Julia Child book, pick up My Life in France, because it's totally worth it. Skip Julie and Julia. And Julia Child's Rules is cute, but definitely go in knowing that it's not just about Julia Child. It's about how she kind of influenced this other person. Number 13 was Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad, and I still have this because I haven't had to take it back yet. And you can kind of see there's so many different tabs I put in here with marks for good. There was so much good writing in this. I talked about it in my mid-year freak out video. It's the story of Cora escaping to the north, and Whitehead weaves in several characters that interweave with her story, and so you find out not only how she thinks about things and race and slavery, but how other people, like the slave catcher and somebody who helped her and that was a little bit more hesitant to help her. And this book was amazing. I gave it 5 stars. It's going to be one of my favorite reads for the year, I think. Whitehead, he made you feel all the feelings for all the people. You realize it's a very complicated system, and that even the people that you didn't like had reasons for what they were doing and had been brought up a certain way. It was really, I was on the edge of my seat. I went through it pretty quickly. I think it took me a day and a half to read that one. So I would definitely, if you're going to pick up 5 novels this year, that's one of them. I mean, hands down. So Underground Railroad is a thumbs up. The 14th one was Present Over Perfect. And I brought this up in one of my reading this week as well, I think. And it's by Shauna Niequist, forward by Brené Brown, which I love her. Shauna Niequist has written a lot of other books that I really enjoy, Cold Tangerines and Bittersweet. And like, this was a very different book for her, I felt like. There wasn't as much flowery language. She has really just gotten to a point, I feel like, where she just wanted to lay it all out. So it was very raw feeling, and I appreciated that. For me, some of the biggest chapters that dealt with marriage and just how do you move forward when you feel like you've been on the same track and then you want to get off the track. And she talks about in it remaking your life and kind of having to undo everything, strip it all away, and figure out what's important. And I think that's such an important lesson for people. One of the stories she talks about with her friends getting together, and they were all saying, oh, we should do this more often. But then somebody said, well, what are you going to do? And she kind of was bothered by that, thinking, well, what am I going to do? Why do I have to be a slave to what I have been doing? And anytime anybody does that in a book, I appreciate it, because I feel like examination is the way to a good life. So it's a good book. It definitely has Christian bent. So if you are not a Christian, this might make you uncomfortable at some points. Just fair warning, it's not going to be for everybody. But yeah, she's not hellfire and brimstone, but she's definitely a Christian and inserts her faith in quite a bit. So fair warning. And the final thing that I picked up and finished before the end of August is The Reading Promise, My Father and the Books We Shared by Alice Ozma. This was a really sweet book. I tore through it pretty quickly too. And I mentioned it before. It's basically a woman who started reading every night with her dad from 4th grade up until she left for college. At least 10 minutes a night. It was the rule. And it was really sweet to hear her talk about how the books that they read impacted them, but mainly what struggles they had to overcome to do that, and how her relationship with her dad was, how her relationship with her mom kind of was, and it wasn't the best. So it was really cool. I like to see different parent-child relationships in books, and while this is nonfiction, it was really a neat idea, and I think, yeah, I gave it 4 stars for that. So that's what I read in August. Tell me what you read in August in the comments. I would love to see some of your favorites or some of the ones that really kind of disappointed you. And I will talk to you in another video. Thanks for bearing with me with my nasally voice. Hopefully I'll feel better soon. Bye.